With Zion Williamson and Damian Lillard out for the rest of the season with their respective injury, what do you think the future holds for both of these guys in their respective careers?
So I mean, like Kyle said, it's a little different for both, but at the same time, very similar. We all know that Dame has been the topic of conversation the past two trade deadlines, and him being frustrated with what Portland was able to surround him with or lack thereof. And now Portland has pretty much traded away everything that he has, or should I say, everything he's ever known in terms of his best friend and his right hand in CJ McCollum. And Dame has said publicly, I don't want to leave. I want to stay here. I want to, build in Portland. I want to raise my family in Portland. All these different things about staying loyal to Portland. But in reality, I don't know how you would want to stay somewhere where you know you're not going to win as the West continues to get more and more competitive and the West continues to stack duos and trios of just a high magnitude. And I mean, the Lakers are having an off year and they still have a very strong tandem in Anthony Davis and LeBron James when healthy. So, I mean, again, that's just an example of a bottom tier team that's close to the Blazers in record, but they still have a better team around them. And I'm just looking at it, I'm saying, for Dame to be successful, he's got to go elsewhere. And I know that they've created about $60 million in cap space for next season, but who wants to go play in Portland for a second year head coach in Chauncey Billups? For the rumors that were circulating that he had lost the locker room with an aging Damian Lillard and a lack thereof a supporting cast, I don't necessarily know who is going to want to go play there. I mean, for God's sakes, Dallas is a more prime location with it being a bigger market, and nobody wants to go play there with Luca. And Luca, quite frankly, could be arguably a better player than Damian Lillard in terms of all around. So who the hell is going to want to just go play in cloudy, depressing Oregon? You know what I'm saying? Like, not to be rude, but that's my thoughts on that situation. The Zion Williamson situation is a little bit more pressing because he is younger. This injury is a little bit more on the lingering aspect because it's his foot. They are saying that he could require a second surgery either soon or this coming off season. So depending on what happens there, Zion hasn't really been inclined to get himself in better shape. We all know that he looked to be a little bit overweight as the season started. We know that he was fluctuating on and off as he was going through rehab. We know that he had distanced himself from the team and the organization for the first 2 or 3 months of the year. Now, recently, joining them and kind of being in contact with them and at least being at the facility and around his teammates. But when you look at that situation, when you look at his age and the situation that he's in with his injury, I would think that New Orleans is more inclined to trade him because of what they're able to get back, just because of the potential that he still carries with, I guess, the playing style that he has with him being a high flying, athletic, scoring, and good defensive power forward or small forward, depending on how you want to use him. Um, Zion still is young and still has a lot to potentially bring to the table, depending on how he heals from this injury. But if New Orleans holds on to this, I think that Zion's going to leave no matter what. This roster's not winning. I mean, granted, right now they are tied with the Lakers for the ninth seed in the Western Conference, which would put them in the play-in tournament. But I'm looking at this and I'm saying I don't see them being competitive in the Western Conference consistently, even if Zion were to come back. I don't necessarily see him re-signing because there's just so much speculation surrounding this, saying that he wants to go and play on another team, and everybody's speculating that he wants to rejoin his former Duke teammate in RJ Barrett in New York. We know that the press conference that he had last year blew up and how he was grinning about how he loved playing in the Garden, how he loved playing there in college, and how he said, I love this place. Other than, of course, New Orleans, I would love to play here. I, I think somehow, some way, he finds a way to get out of New Orleans. Whether he goes to the Knicks or he doesn't, I think that it would be in New Orleans' best interest to get rid of him. Go and get a couple of picks back. Go and get some players back. You have some great pieces in CJ and Brandon Ingram and Valanciunas and a couple of other young stars. I think that this team moving forward is better off without him, and that's just quite frankly how I see that playing out, in my opinion.
And Kevin, I see it a little bit differently. Not much, but just a little bit differently. So I guess to focus on Zion first, I'm gonna be honest with you. I think that his career, his like long-term career in the NBA is in a little bit of doubt here. And it's because of that lingering foot issue. And to kind of dive into this a little bit more specifically, the one thing about Zion Williamson that has always been a pressing matter is his weight. And it doesn't help when you have this foot injury to go along with that because, when you're bringing down that much weight on a consistent basis and your foot is already compromised, that's not going to do you any good moving forward throughout the rest of your career. Now, hopefully, this foot issue gets resolved this offseason, and hopefully he's able to lose some sort of weight going into next season, and it works out for Zion in the long run, and then he has a prosperous career afterwards. Because, to be quite honest with you, Kevin, he was one of the more sensational rookies or one of the more sensational younger players that the NBA had to offer until he got hurt. He was averaging around 25 points a game. And it's just unfortunate in his case that he's been dealing with this lingering foot issue that could potentially, really hinder his career moving forward if it's not corrected now. So I think when it comes to Zion's trade value, I don't really actually have it that high because I think teams are looking at Zion and they look at his age. They definitely see the fact that he's young and that he's extremely athletic when he's fully healthy. But I think teams are going to be a little bit cautious to possibly pull a trade trigger with him simply just because the weight is going to be an issue and this lingering foot issue, which honestly, I think the foot issue is a little bit more pressing than the weight issue. The weight issue can be addressed. That's not really the big issue here. That foot injury is. And I do think that has a hindrance and when it comes to his trade value. So with Zion, yeah, his career is in a little bit of doubt as far as I'm concerned, as far as his long-term career goes. Now with Damian Lillard can bounce back from this abdomen injury. I'm not worried about Dame and the effectiveness that he brings on the court. One of the most electrifying three-point shooters in the game. He's a great clutch player to have on a team. But I do see a possible scenario where he could potentially be traded from Portland. And I think it's because I think Portland's at the point in time where they have to make a decision. Do you just go full rebuild or do you possibly build around Damian Lillard to try to make this team somewhat formidable going into not only next season, but the years afterward? And I think this offseason, I really legitimately believe that they are going to be looking at trade options for Dame because I think that they're going to be looking at just starting a full rebuild this offseason. And Damian Lillard, despite the fact that he had this abdomen injury, he has so much trade value. You can get a lot back from Dame. You can get it in the form of players. You can get it with draft picks. You have flexibility with Dame's trade value. It's just whether or not they actually do that trade. They already did it with CJ McCollum. They shipped him off to New Orleans this season before the trade deadline. I could definitely see a scenario where that front office with the Portland Trailblazers looks at the situation and saying, you know what, we just have to accept the fact that this team is just not competitive right now. Let's trade Dame. Let's get some draft capital in return, and let's just start it all over again. And I think when you look at Portland, Portland maximized their window as far as being able to be a competitive force in the Western Conference. Portland's nowhere near the team that it should be just because Dame's not there. DJ McCollum was no longer there. Team kind of hit its pinnacle with the roster that they had assembled and the pieces that they had there. So the way that I see it, I think Dame's career in Portland is actually done. I could see him getting traded this offseason just because of the situation that I laid out. So, when I look at the grand scheme of things, granted, these two players, they're extremely pivotal for both of their teams. Zion's youth is definitely something that New Orleans has to consider just because when you have him to go alongside with CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, I mean, these are really good pieces to work with. Hopefully, it works in Zion's case in the long run. When it comes to Dame, I definitely see Dame in a scenario where he gets traded this offseason. Whether Portland does that or not kind of remains to be seen at this point. But my bet is I think he gets traded this offseason. I think they're going to start a full rebuild. That's just how I see it.